The following program is brought to you in part by the film Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace.
Peace means taking into account the dignity of other people and the fact that there are other people who have certain rights.
Peace in the Middle East basically will come when the clergy in the mosque on Friday preach it and when the rabbis in the synagogue on Saturday preach it. During the time of Camp David I, you had political leadership that was able to contain that type of religious fervor. What the country needs is some prescient understanding of what is going to happen in the future. Hi, I'm Leon Charney, and this is the Leon Charney Report. Sometimes we major in trying to explain to you what's happening in the Middle East. And the Middle East is always the muddled East, and it's a trouble spot. And today we brought on two excellent personalities who can really tell you both sides of the story. We have Hasan Rahman here, who is the PLO representative in Washington. It's tantamount to being sort of the ambassador for the chairman of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and Mr. Arafat, who is its chairman. And we have Brigadier General Reserve Micha, who happens to be an old friend of mine, was the first contact I made when I landed in Israel in 1967 looking for a Coca-Cola, and he says, there is none here. It's only Tempo. Micha, welcome. Hasan, welcome. Did you ever meet before?
No, this is the first time.
Really?
Yes.
You sure? On a battlefield?
Well,
No.
How do you
sure.
know? You know who's on a battlefield right away?
Well, I'm not sure we ever met before.
Had he met me on the battlefield, he would not be alive now.
All right. Well,
that's true. He's an ordnance. He doesn't shoot. He carries guns.
I'm carrying the
I've
logistics.
never been in the battlefield, so that's why.
Micha, let's start with you. Israel's been under a torrent of, I think, 140 or 135 people have been killed since the Oslo agreements. You're a military man for 33 years. What is the future of the Oslo agreements, in your opinion?
Well, I'm an optimistic character, and I think the future is that there is hope. There is hope for peace, and my personal opinion is that we were waiting for this time to have peace, to live together with our neighbors. Frankly talking, I am also a Palestinian. I was born in Tel Aviv, and my birth certificate certificate says Palestine.
Really?
It says Palestina, I meaning Eretz Israel, but it's Palestine. So I'm as the Palestinians as Mr. Hasan, who was born in Ramallah, understand, and as such, I think that we are neighbors, we are cousins, and my take is that we want to live in peace, and I do believe in it. And I think that the Oslo agreement opened a very important door to get into a peace agreement. And the fact is that we still have trouble, as you said. Many people were killed since. And if you are talking about this cases where we have these youngsters coming wrapped up with explosives, and if you would ask me what do I feel about it, that's tremendously terrible, and I'm not sure that there is a way to stop these guys except to deal with those guys who are leading them and training them, and unfortunately are doing a brainwash to them, telling them that they are going to become heroes, saints, and poor guys. I think, this is my opinion, are doing it because they feel like they are going to become saints, going to heaven and so forth, and unfortunately create these terrible events that I do hope that we will find a way. And when I say we, I mean both sides. I mean the PLO, I mean the Israelis will find a way to get to these people, to try and educate and tell them that this is not the way, because we are jeopardizing by our own the same hope that we both are looking for. And
Hasan, is there an answer to this terrorism?
Well, let me just say the following. I agree with the General that Oslo Accord opened
It was a watershed.
Opened a wide gate for peace in the Middle East. It changed the political landscape of our region. The Middle East is and never going to be the same after the Oslo Accords. Now, what has been achieved on that front is tremendous. I mean, you have a peace agreement between Israel and Jordan, serious negotiations even between Syria, Lebanon, and the Israelis. The Palestinians and the Israelis have an agreement that even if they face difficulties, but this agreement constitutes the guideline for negotiations in the future. Arab countries are having relations with Israel. There is an interaction that is taking place on many levels between Palestinians and the Israelis. So we have this agreement that opened the gate wide open for people to interact with each other. Now,
that we learn about summits. Summits are not an objective in and of themselves. Summits must fit a particular objective. They have to have a certain concrete utility. And summits can be one of two things. They can be used to launch and frame the issues, to widen the space for the negotiators to explore the issues. Or summits can be decision summits, where the negotiators have negotiated, the technical people have negotiated, we have identified the small areas of difference between the two sides, and now it's time to clinch the deal. Camp David 1 was more of the latter type. They went in knowing that they had to reach a decision. Right now, I think the issues are not mature enough, they're not ripe enough. The sides still need to work at a lower level, not at the leaders level, but at the negotiators levels. They need to sit down and work out some of the details. This is the first time that the two sides under the current leaderships have actually sat. So you need to do some explorations. If you have a summit too early, it will fail. This is a time to do some exploratory points and start thinking very seriously about what is the time to employ and to deploy a presidential summit. So it is a tool in our toolbox, it's a tool in the president's toolbox, but as of yet it is premature. I think if we do it right now, we'll have a failure, and a failure comes with a price. So this I will wait a little bit on.
Now, on both sides we have extremists, and those extremists have different agenda. Their agenda is not to accept this new reality that is emerging. On our side, we have the extremists who are trying to undermine the peace process. On the Israeli side, there are people who are trying to undermine the peace process by different means. Those settlers, for example, who are trying to penetrate into the territory which the Palestinians believe that at some time should become their homeland, over which they will build their own state that will live side by side with Israel in peace and in harmony. So the challenge that we face, both of us, Israelis as well as Palestinians at this point, is not to let those extreme groups...
How do you do that?
From our side, we have really to be very vigilant. We need to look at this situation not only from a security point of view. This is a security issue.
It's political, it's
but
economical.
It is political and economic.
Right.
Well, certainly a religious umbrella for political process is not helpful. I don't think that this is true about Abu Mazen, because I don't think that he is motivated by religious attitudes, and I don't think that this is true about even the Prime Minister of Israel, who is not motivated by religious attitudes. But maybe by some misperceptions about priorities, what's right, what's wrong, what's more important, what's less important. It's true about the Palestinians, it may be true about Israel.
I believe the only way to distribute power among the Palestinians is to hold elections in the West Bank and Gaza and create a democratic government. That's how you decentralize.
Right.
You don't decentralize by not having elections. And that's why we are insisting, and hopefully we and the Israelis, who are our partners in this peace process, will reach an agreement on elections very soon.
And they're not going to be holding elections because Hamas refuses to hold elections because they see the poll results. And they know how they're fare. They won't fare well. And they know that, so that they are categorically opposed to elections. Their position is unity first, elections after. They know that's meaningless, and they know it, which is why they love that phrase. It doesn't really matter, because Hamas may complain all they like about the current structure of the PLO. They agree with everybody else that the PLO is in fact the diplomatic representative of the Palestinians. So the negotiations will be between Israel and the PLO. When we can get back to those negotiations, I'm not sure.
And you think that that would help a lot?
Oh, definitely. It will create the kind of leadership that we want, and it gives legitimacy to the peace process, and it will isolate those groups who now are trying to undermine the peace process because there is no elected government.
Will the Hamas participate in those elections?
I believe Hamas is two groups. Hamas, there's the political Hamas and there's the military Hamas.
Right.
I myself, if you ask my views, I will tell you Hamas should participate, and we should incorporate all the segments of the Palestinian society in the political process and allow them to express themselves through the legitimate political structure. Otherwise, you leave them, the only way to express their views is through violence. So by incorporating them into the political process, you isolate those who support the violence.
All right, we got to cut for a commercial break. We'll be back in 1 minute to continue this very important topic, and it is the peace in the Middle East. Can we achieve it? We'll talk to a Brigadier General, Micha and Hasan Rahman, who's the PLO representative in Washington. We'll ask them a big question. Do they think there is going to be a Palestinian state?
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
The price of peace is very high. To have this courageous man and my close friend killed.
Winner of the Telly Award for Best Cultural Program. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com. Now get the book the hit movie was based on, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the Backdoor Channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian Peace Treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or Audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels.
We're back. I'm Leon Charney. We're talking to Hasan Rahman, who is the PLO representative in Washington, which is tantamount to being the ambassador for the PLO organization, and Brigadier General Micha, who served 33 years in the Israeli military and has had 3 children grow up in Israel who have also served in the military, is born in Israel. He's a man who can speak. He's an Israeli citizen who served his country very well, and he has opinions. Micha, big question for you. When Rabin came back and executed the Oslo agreements, did he tell the nation, or did you think as an Israeli citizen that this is the progenitor or the beginning of the possibility of a Palestinian state?
I don't think so. That was not the message. The message was, to begin with, and this is what I think the nation understood is that this is the beginning of a peace process, of the autonomy to begin with, to the interim time, and to get to live together with the Palestinians. I have to admit that it wasn't stated clearly and bluntly that this is the first step of establishing the Palestinian state.
How would you feel about a Palestinian state?
I have to say that before I say my opinion about it, I think that there are some provisions that have to take place in order to establish and have a Palestinian state. Because when you talk to an Israeli, and I'm talking about the average common Israeli, liberal, I'm not talking about any extremists, when you talk about establishing a Palestinian state, the first answer will be, hey, are they going to be there behind the border, that they can shell Tel Aviv, that they can cross the border and be instantly in our places, and so on and so forth, meaning that the first call goes for a kind of a war relationship. What I'm saying is, and that's my major point before telling you my opinion, it's a matter of education. If we want to live in peace and we want to be neighbors, people have to be educated to recognize and to appreciate the other nation. It's a matter of hatred that I find with many Arab people. It's a matter of education in schools that they live with. I think that this is not a way of education. If you will talk to the youngsters, to the people, I'm not sure that the Israeli people hate the Arabs, would go on such missions like killing Arabs. And I'm not talking about this crazy guy who did what has been done in Hebron. Goldstein. This is a real crazy, out of the way, which does not represent a way of thinking, a way of behaving, a way of appreciating.
I think Israel castigated him. I think the Israeli government said what they had to say. I think they apologized profusely.
No question about it. And my opinion is that this is something that shouldn't have happened. And this is.
Let me ask you a question, Micha. You've passed how many wars?
Oh, well, when I was a youngster, I was still a member of the underground of the Haganah when we fought the Brits.
You don't look that old.
Thank you. It's a compliment.
Does he look more than 45?
No.
All right, so you fought the Brits?
Yes, when I was a young guy, I got a medal for it even. But then the 1948 Independence War, the Sinai War in 1957, the 6 Days War in 1967, the Attrition War during the early 70s, the 1973 war, I have to admit that I didn't fight. I was fighting here in the United States, and you were involved in it when we were trying to move past the airlift operation and get the supplies and the ammunition and all the other things to the guys in the battlefield.
It's an interesting story, Hasan. I want you to hear this.
And
then Paz was in the defense mission here, purchasing army equipment for Israel during the Yom Kippur War. I was at that time an advisor to a senator of Indiana called Vance Hartke. And what was happening was Mr. Kissinger, you remember Mr. Kissinger, don't you? You met him many times at a lot of parties, I'm sure. Mr. Kissinger was playing balls with Golda Meir about whether they should get equipment or not, and I was in a position to go public with this. And Flora Lewis of the New York Times, remember her? Yes. She was ready to publicize the whole story and really blast Kissinger open. And I was at an airport at TWA on my way to Paris and then to Israel, and we had a deadline, and I called Micha Paz at the airport. I said, you got to give me a yes or a no. It was 7 o'clock. He said, give me 5 more minutes. I called him back in 7.07, and he had 7.06. They got to go ahead to do the airlift, and that changed the war. Otherwise, it was a classical story of wonderful diplomacy by some of our great people, American great people, called Schlesinger and Kissinger and Richard Nixon. Read it in a book called Special Counsel, written by me. I'll give you a copy, because you're a very moderate man, and I think the world needs moderate people. Anyway, so you can accept a Palestinian state if people are educated? Is that your
I
answer?
think so. Well, if you ask me, I would accept a Palestinian state when it's being built upon understanding and appreciation and education, and hopefully eliminate this kind of extremism.
Are you symptomatic of most Israelis? You think most Israelis feel your way?
I would say that, well, I wouldn't dare say that the majority today think about it. I think that's a matter, again, of education. Most of the people still have to get used to the fact that we can live together with the Palestinians. But every time where there is such a happening, you know, people tend to forget and say, God, how can we live with these guys? See what they are doing. There is no way we can carry on. But, you know, it happens, and then it ends, and people tend to forget. The question is, can we do something about it?
Right now, I don't see any political figure with the real leadership potential. But perhaps during our conversation, somebody in Ramallah or Bethlehem decides to rise up. Perhaps, I hope very, very much that there will be someone with, first of all, strong leadership. Second, real determination to make peace with Israel. And third, that that person would be intelligent enough to realize where the final border of relinquishments lies. Only when two people of this kind meet, as the case was between Begin and Sadat, peace is viable.
Hasan, be direct. When the Oslo agreements were negotiated and were executed, was there any doubt in your mind that that would lead to a Palestinian state?
No, no. I had no doubt that this process will culminate in a Palestinian state. Let me tell you why.
Did you people convey that to the Israelis?
I'm sure that it was there because...
My feeling is that Rabin has not really spoken I don't want to say not truthfully, but he didn't give all the facts to the people of Israel, because everybody that I spoke to, especially the Arabs, everybody said this is the progenitor, this is the beginning of a Palestinian state.
Absolutely. Let me tell you how. I mean, I'm sure that the people who were engaged in the negotiations spoke about it, but it was not part of the document.
Right.
What was part of the document is the process itself, which is an incremental process that goes through stages, and it culminates in the establishment of a self-government for the Palestinians. Now, if you have a government that's elected with its own police force, with its own legislative branch and executive branch, what do you call that? State. Now, those people who will live under this government, Palestinian government, will not hold an Israeli passport. And they will not have a Jordanian passport. They will have a Palestinian passport, and this was agreed upon. So you have all the elements of a state without calling it a state, in fact. So in my views, and understanding the dynamics of this process, and what is in the strategic interest of both people. Because Israel does not want 3 million Palestinians to be Israelis. And those 3 million Palestinians do not want to be Israelis. And they do not want to be Jordanians. And they do not want to be Syrians. And they don't want to be Egyptians. And they want to live as Palestinians. So I personally believe that it is in the interest of Israel on the long run to have a Palestinian state. Because only then the Palestinians will feel they are at parity with Israel, and that they are able to treat Israel from a position of equality. Because if the Palestinians dislike anything, they dislike their subjugation, their inferiority in that context of nation states of the region. Jordan is a state. Egypt, every people in our region has their own state except the Palestinians. Now, if you want to make peace with the Palestinians, you have to treat them as like equals. And you cannot be more equal than the others. That's why I believe that the Palestinian state will be in the interest of everyone concerned. Adding to that, that this Palestinian state will provide identity to the Palestinian refugees who live in the other Arab countries and who will not feel that they have been sold out by the leadership of the PLO. You have to incorporate them. That does not mean that all of them will return back to what Palestine is, but they will feel that they belong to a state in an age of the nation states.
The Israeli-Palestinian relationship, especially on the ground in between Israel and the occupied territories, it is one of dominance and subordination. It's defined by occupation. The occupation is a system of control of a subordinate population. Palestinians have lived, the Palestinians of the occupied territories have lived under Israeli rule since 1967 with no rights, with no passport, with no citizenship, without any standing in Israel. In other words, without any way to interact in a healthy manner with the government that rules them. It's a relationship of dominance and subordination. And it's structural. It's not about Israel's psychology. It's not about Israeli culture or Palestinian culture or Jews and Arabs or anything like that. You could reverse the positionality and have the same thing. It really is a relationship between prisoners and prison guards. It's pretty as simple as that. Now that's obviously a caricature in a sense, because every individual can get out of that easily, and there are plenty of individual relationships that don't look like that. Right. But socially, that's the structure. Most Israelis live in that coastal area between Tel Aviv and Haifa. And most of them don't deal with Palestinians, except for the Palestinian minority in Israel, which is a small minority of 20%, and they don't even deal with them very much, but they certainly don't deal with the Palestinians in the occupied territories, except insofar as some of them do stints in the military and go to checkpoints and serve as checkpoint guards, which really is like being a prison guard in a sense. And so this is the main interaction, and then the other interaction has to do with rockets and bombs and things like that. So what I'm suggesting is that it's going to be very hard for a Palestinian leader to be seen with the same degree of respect that Sadat was by Israelis, and vice versa, for an Israeli leader to be seen with the same respect. I think Rabin, is getting there among Palestinians, and I'm not sure that Arafat ever did. I think it's really going to be it's going to be much harder for a Palestinian from the occupied territories to have the same kind of impact that Sadat did psychologically with Israelis, because none of them are seen as a fearsome enemy. They are all seen as a danger and a group of people to be controlled.
All right, we got to cut for a commercial break, and we'll come back and continue this vital conversation about peace in the Middle East, and we'll ask both these gentlemen what they think of the concept of partition, and then we'll talk about how economically the Palestinian Authority is going to fund itself. It seems to me that the countries, the donor countries, the ones that have promised some money, have not been delivering, and maybe this is holding up some of the process. So don't leave us. We'll be right back.
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
The price of peace is very high. To have this courageous man and my close friend killed.
Winner of the Telly Award for Best Cultural Program. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com. Now get the book the hit movie was based on, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the backdoor channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian Peace Treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or Audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels.
We're back. I'm Leon Charney. We're discussing the Middle East. We're discussing it with two prominent Middle East citizens. One is Hasan Rahman, the chief representative for the PLO in the United States, born in Ramallah, educated in the United States at City University, and then at the University of Puerto Rico, and served as deputy head of the Palestinian Liberation Organization mission at the United Nations for about 10 years. So he knows New York maybe better than Gaza, I'm not sure. And Micha, a brigadier general who served in the Israeli Defense Forces for 33 years and rose to brigadier general and passed through, as you saw, about 6 or 8 wars, which is enough for anybody to take on both sides. Micha, Rabin the other day discussed in his cabinet the concept of partition and putting up sort of a wall between the Palestinians and the Israelis. Would that give him a sense of security?
Well, I would say that when saying partition and a wall, I don't think that literally he meant a wall. When talking about separating the two nations, he's practically talking about two entities that we were just talking about it before. And when talking about a partition, what I would see and what I understood that he is talking about getting the means to secure in the two nations and to make sure that each one lives at his place, lives with security, and take all the means to keep it by a so-called wall or partition.
Rabin was quite close, clearly in his readiness. I was quite close. Ehud Olmert was quite close. Everyone under different situations, different tactic. Basically, the reality is that somehow the Palestinians until now was not ready when our leadership was ready. And probably this will change. Probably somehow at a certain point they will realize that there is no, the same way that Sadat realized at a certain point, there is no way to dictate to Israel anything, to bring it to capitulation through the sheer use of force. So you have to find a way to talk. It is only when the Palestinians will realize that we will stick to our security consideration under whatever situation, especially looking what happens around us here, but that beyond that we are ready to have a Palestinian, viable, sovereign state, probably demilitarized, but sovereign neighbor, but they have to accept us as well, and that's basically now seems to be the obstacle.
All right, let's assume that happened. Would that affect the workers? I know a lot of workers from Gaza work in Israel. Do the Gazans and the Palestinians need Israel in the sense for their economic force de jour, force de tour?
You know, our struggle for the last many years has been towards the achievement of independence for the Palestinians, from the Israelis and from everyone else. Independence and to establish interdependence rather than dependence. So if we have no problem with separation between the two people, if that provides the Israelis with a sense of security. But you cannot have separation and occupation at the same time. In order to have separation, you have to end occupation. And that will give the Palestinians a sense of security and give the Israeli also a sense of security. In my views, Mr. Rabin has a problem at this point. And it's a problem that results from a sense of lack of security due to the acts of violence that were directed against Israel in the last couple of months, which led to nervousness within the Israeli public that Mr. Rabin feels in the rating, in his rating in the polls. Yasser Arafat, on the other side, also is feeling nervous because he feels that the situation has not changed on the ground sufficiently, so to produce support from the Palestinian public to the peace process. So both Chairman Arafat and Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin are facing problems with their own constituencies at this point. How to overcome that?
Right.
I believe that the two are dependent on each other, and they need to work with each other, and not to react emotionally to this issue. They have
pretty difficult, isn't it?
Yes, it is difficult, but I believe that the stakes are so high that we cannot afford to be erratic and do things in a hasty manner. Because whatever step we take, whether it is Israelis or Palestinians, it is going to affect the peace process. And if it affects the peace process negatively, the two peoples, Palestinians as well as Israelis, will be losing. And that's why I believe that we will like to work with the Israelis. We would like to work with the Israelis in order to provide the Israelis with a sense of security. But also in exchange, the Israelis would have to work with us in order to provide our people with what they need. And they need two things. First of all, political independence and economic development.
I think we have to conceptually understand that the situation after peace will be fundamentally different from the situation under occupation. Right now, the Palestinians are tied to the Israelis because that's the only way you can do it, as long as the Israelis continue to occupy the Palestinian territories. You know, there are technical reasons for this, but basically, as long as the Israelis control the borders, the Palestinians cannot have their free economic policy. Once you have peace, you will have two states that will have their own economic systems, and then they will have to forge a new set of economic relations. I think the future Palestinian state will have to make a choice. Does it want to be linked westwards, towards Europe, towards the West, towards the world? In which case, it will make perfect sense to have strong economic ties with Israel. Or do you want to look eastwards and be part of the Arab economic orbit? In which course, of course, you will look eastwards. In which case, you'll end up being just another Arab client state.
All right, let me ask you a question, Hasan. You read in the newspaper that kamikaze extremist blows up a Betlid station of soldiers. What happens to you emotionally when you read that?
Well, absolutely. Somebody like me who really is a great believer in this peace process. I belong to the school of thought within the Palestinian political movement that started this process in 1974. I mean, I have been involved in peace, in pushing and advancing the peace process from our end since 1974. So I'm a great believer, and I don't really believe that killing innocent people, especially at a time when you are engaged in peace negotiations, is going to serve a good purpose. On the contrary, it does not serve in any way, form, or shape the interests of the Palestinian people. And those acts of violence against the Israelis are detrimental to the interests of the Palestinians because they play into the hands of the right wing in Israel. And it is not in our interest to have the right wing of Israel or within the American Jewish community or any Jewish community around the world to be strengthened. Our partner in this peace process is the peace supporters in Israel, and those are labor and other forces who believe in the peace process. And it is not Netanyahu, and it is not the settlers, and it's not Gush Umanim, and it is not Likud. So our partners in this process, and therefore we need to do everything to enhance the power of those in Israel who believe in the peace process. And Mr. Rabin and his group also need to understand that when they close off the borders, they are enhancing the power of the extremists, because when you have 50,000 Palestinians without work, and those are day laborers, they need to produce enough to feed their families.
So it's a catch-22.
It is a catch-22.
Rabin has to close the borders to satisfy the security and the nervousness of his nation, and your people
which we sympathize with.
Your people need economic ability in order to survive. Otherwise, the extremists come into being. Micha, it's an Israeli. Are you satisfied with the Camp David agreements?
Talking about the peace agreement with Egypt.
Yeah.
Well, the answer is yes. It's, as a matter of fact, we have peace with Egypt, and there is quiet. Well, maybe it's not the real full peace relationship that I would have expected, like having Egyptians coming to Israel, back and forth, like so many Israelis are coming and visiting in Egypt. But I would sum up it in a way that this peace agreement really was a very important breakthrough in our region.
The interesting thing about Israel is most of the generals are like you. Most of the people who fought the wars are in a sense peaceniks, let's call them for a better word.
Yes.
And most of the people who are against it are
living in Brooklyn.
Well, you know, we're going to get a lot of mail on this show, I'm sure, for why we put a program like this together. We think you, as an Israeli citizen with your background, have a right to speak for Israel, and you have obviously a right to speak for the PLO. Hasan, big question for you. Why don't you renounce that covenant?
Oh, we announced the covenant. The only thing is, the only problem that we need to get those 500 members of the Palestine National Council together to make an official amendment to the covenant.
So you want me to send my chauffeur to bring them together?
Well, no. The problem is that we have logistical problems at this point. Those people live in all parts of the world, and you need 2/3 majority for you to hold that, to have a quorum.
Can't do it by proxy?
No, you can't. It's individuals, it's persons.
So are you saying on the Leon Charney report, as soon as you get the logistics worked out, the covenant bill will be announced?
Absolutely.
There's a scoop for the New York Times, Micha, and you can take that back to the Ma'ariv or Yediot, whoever you like better.
Well, this was my next question about this covenant, and you just caught it on time, because my question is, if we are talking about the peace process, why is this covenant still exists? And I would say that if the way you were able to get these 500 people together to sign it, I think this should be the same effort to get them back and wave it out. And it's a matter of a goodwill, and this is one of the points that I do think that would make a big difference if we, the Israelis, would know that you've done it and it's waved.
It would help, Hasan.
I think so.
I know, but you know, we are even beyond the covenant, because we are involved in practical
but
steps.
the perception to the world.
I understand, but you cannot go and help people, because some of those people live in Syria, some live in Lebanon, some live in Argentina, some live in Australia, and you need a place to host all of those people, and that they themselves want to come.
We'll give you a hall in Tel Aviv.
That's not the point. I know what you are meaning, but would Syria allow those people to live?
Why not?
Ask them.
Hasan, this is an O.J. Simpson defense.
Well, I don't know.
It's a little bit juicy.
No. Okay.
But we'll accept it from you as the base. But logistically, I could get you 500 Jewish people to donate a plane here.
We spoke to Mr. Shimon Peres about it.
And what did he say?
And he said to a Jewish audience the other day, he said, well, you know, it seems to me that you are more interested about it than us who are negotiating with the Palestinians.
So you're saying the Israeli government is not that concerned?
They are very happy with the situation as it is, because they see that we are implementing the amendment. We are not talking about something academic. We are here, we have an agreement with Israel, economic agreement.
All right, we understand that.
Yes, we are implementing agreements on the ground. We are engaged in joint ventures with the Israelis. So everything, in other words, our action on the ground makes those provisions in the covenant irrelevant.
All right, we got a second on that. Do you agree or disagree?
I disagree, because I think that our extremists still using the fact that this covenant exists.
All right, I agree. My opinion is that if it takes a plane of, I'd go belly whopping all over the place to bring them together if that's all it takes.
Arafat was not ripe for the kind of decisions that had to be made in order to bridge the gaps, namely to, with metaphorically more than 9% of his request being answered before he even opened negotiation, to be ready to sit down and negotiate. And I think that it reflected his inability to recognize the right of Israel to exist as a normal, acceptable member of the family of nations of the Middle East.
don't leave us. We got to continue this conversation, talk about economics, because that's the foundation of what makes this thing move, and that leads to education and hopefully a better world. Don't leave us.
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
The price of peace is very high. To have this courageous man and my close friend killed.
Winner of the Telly Award for Best Cultural Program. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com. Now get the book the hit movie was based on, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the backdoor channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian Peace Treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or Audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels.
We're back. I'm Leon Charney. I'm trying to become a Middle East peace negotiator. In case you missed it, I did play some small role in the Camp David peace agreements. Hasan, why are the donor countries holding back the Ghaith, the money? You know what Ghaith means, right?
Yes.
Dineros, pesos.
Yes, yes. I believe they...
I can get you a lot of pesos bonds, by the way, if you want, for the Gaza Strip.
That's great. I mean, we are willing to discuss that off camera. But I believe that, first of all, you can never build an economy on the basis of aid only.
True statement, and well said, as a person who knows finance.
You build an economy through trade and not aid. But we need the aid in order to build the infrastructure that is destroyed in Gaza and the West Bank. And unfortunately, we are not getting the money.
But why? Why? Tell me why.
Well, first of all, because look at
there's
the
a feeling,
I'll give you the
feeling that the distribution doesn't go to the people.
I'll give you the example.
Go ahead.
The United States, for example, allocates $75 million to be spent through USAID projects. 60% of this money goes to American bureaucracy to implement the projects. So we end up with 30 cents on the dollar. Not in money, but in services. And you cannot...
Have you told this to the State Department?
Of course I said it, and it is published in the Washington Post and everywhere. And I said
so what do they tell you?
Well, they said the laws, U.S. laws, do not give...
You're the senior representative of the PLO in Washington. You meet with Secretary of State?
I saw the Secretary of State.
And you bang at him and you say, look, we need aid?
Well, I not at him personally, but the people who are in the State Department.
Under Secretary.
And they will tell you, listen, those are the laws that were promulgated by the Congress. We are not giving money. We give allocations, $75 million, that has to be spent by American companies in the West Bank and Gaza. In other words, we do not give you any money in cash. We are going to hire a consulting firm in Virginia to give you technical assistance, and we will give them $10 million. But to you, we're not giving $10 million. And those are the laws. So if you...
But how about the other countries? Saudi Arabia? Saudi Arabia?
Saudi Arabia gave money, gave $100 million, for example. Some of it...
to oil wells.
Okay. I mean,
You're on my side. You're on my side with that one, right?
I am not going to sit down on your show and criticize Saudi Arabia. I'm not going to do it. If I have any criticism, we will talk about it. But I'm going to state the fact. The fact is that Saudi Arabia contributes $100 million. A great portion of that goes to pay the salaries of the police force.
I understand.
Yes. And the rest is going to the World Bank to become part of projects that are going to be implemented over 2 or 3 years period. So,
but
in
you
my
need
views,
short-term money.
I need short-term monies. But in order to get the short-term money, we need money directly now for the administration to recruit good people and to have its own projects. Second, we need to transform the political situation on the ground. So the private sector will have confidence
to invest
in the system to invest.
I understand.
Palestinian and international.
A question for you. As an Israeli citizen, would you be against the Israeli government lending money to the Palestinian Authority? Or you think it's a positive move? It's your money.
If it's lending money in order to help them to create a healthy economy, I think this would be a good thing to do. And my opinion, as part of helping the Palestinians to create a good economic situation, is to let the Palestinians come and work in Israel. I'm coming back to a subject we have discussed before.
We got about a minute and a half,
Okay.
so I'm going to ask some quick questions and we'll wrap it up. Would you do business with the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip today?
I have already advertised the possibility of this, and we got some phone calls from people from Gaza who are ready to start do some. Things didn't move too far, but in principle the answer is yes. If there is a sincere way to do business, and if there are people that we can do it with them.
So your answer is yes?
Yes.
Hasan?
Most of our trade is with Israel at this point. Everything, I mean, 90% of our products that we need in the West Bank and Gaza comes from Israel. We need really to have a partnership with the Israelis.
Okay. Hasan, thank you very much for coming on. Pleasure to see you. Micha, my pleasure to see you, and hope we never see any more wars between the two of you. Look, between these two fellas here, I think we can make the peace operate. They both seem to be moderate people, both have tremendous backgrounds on their own side, Micha in the military, Hasan on the PLO side, and it looks like we got to get a couple of more of these guys together to make them sit down, and then hopefully we'll bring some peace to the Middle East. In any case, we hope we illuminated you a little bit today, and hope you got some of the things that are on your heart out through me by talking with Hasan and Micha Paz. And I know the letters are going to come in, but that's the risk we take about doing a show. We'll see you next week.